It was interview day. His tie was cheap but neatly knotted. The scuffs on his shoes had been buffed out the night before. His resume was printed on thick paper, not expensive, just sturdy. The kind you use when you want them to feel something in their hands, even if they don't look too closely. Marcus arrived 15 minutes early. The company towered over the corner of 48th and Lexington, all glass, polished steel, and the quiet kind of wealth that doesn't need to announce itself. He'd dreamed of walking through these doors since his second year in college, when a guest speaker from the firm gave a talk that made the future feel less like fantasy and more like blueprints. Now he was here, wearing his best, carrying his best, and trying not to sweat through his shirt. The receptionist barely glanced up. The HR assistant, cheerful but clipped, called him back with a, "We'll see how this goes," smile. And the interviewer, middle-aged, gray suit, cold eyes that scanned his resume like he'd already made up his mind. They asked about his experience, then his GPA, then his fit for the company culture. Then, finally, after a pause too long to be comfortable, the man leaned back and said, "You're clearly smart, impressive background, but if I'm being honest, we just don't usually hire people like you." Marcus didn't ask what he meant. He already knew. He gathered his things, nodded politely, and left without another word. The elevator ride down was quiet. Too quiet. When he stepped outside, the street noise hit him like a wave. Life was still moving. Taxis, steam grates, late lunch crowds. But Marcus stood there for a second longer than he needed to. Not broken, not even angry. Just different. Something had shifted, and whatever it was, he wasn't going to walk away from it.
Have you ever been told, directly or indirectly, that who you are simply didn't belong?
He didn't tell his mom about the interview. When she asked that night, he just said, "Went fine," then changed the subject. He talked about the weather, about how the buses were packed, about nothing at all. But not about that room, not about that sentence. He thought maybe it was just that one guy, maybe the next place would be better, maybe the next person wouldn't say it out loud. But over the next few weeks, maybe started sounding a lot like denial. He applied to 12 more companies. 4 called back, 2 interviews. No offers. One woman said, "You have great energy, but I'm not sure you'd thrive in our environment." Another simply said, "You'll go far somewhere else." Somewhere else. It was always somewhere else. At first he checked his email every hour, then once in the morning, then not at all. The motivation that used to wake him up before sunrise now left him staring at the ceiling until noon. He stopped shaving, let his voicemail pile up. He told himself it was the economy. That tech was a competitive field, that it wasn't about him. But in the quiet moments, when he walked past glass buildings and caught his reflection in their shine, the doubt whispered louder than any rejection ever did. One day, while scrolling through job boards he'd already memorized, he paused on a listing. Not because it was a good fit, but because it was the same company that turned him down. Same job title, same requirements, same salary, different posting date, fresh. He stared at it for a while, then laughed. Not the kind of laugh that comes from humor, the kind that comes when something breaks, and you don't know how to scream. Later that night, he walked past the same intersection from the day of the interview. The building lights were still on, people still inside, coffee cups on desks, laptops glowing, as if nothing had ever happened, as if the room that said, "We don't hire people like you," had never existed. He stood there watching, and for the first time he felt it fully. Not just rejection, but erasure. It's one thing to be denied. It's another to feel like the door was never meant to exist for you at all. Marcus didn't sleep much that night. Not because of anxiety, not even because of anger, but because the question finally formed completely. What if they were right? What if I don't belong anywhere they're willing to look? He didn't have the answer yet, but he knew this. If no one was going to open the door, he'd have to find out how to build one. The next few months were blurry, not dramatic, not cinematic, just long. Marcus took a part-time job at a shipping warehouse across town. It paid by the hour and bruised his back, but it didn't ask about his resume. No one there cared where he went to school, or how well he could code, or what books he'd read. As long as the boxes moved from dock to truck, he had a place. He worked quietly, kept his hoodie up, showed up on time, left without saying much. But somewhere in that routine, between tape guns and concrete floors, he began to notice something he hadn't expected. His mind wouldn't stop moving. While others listened to music or zoned out, Marcus found himself solving problems in his head. He'd see how the barcodes were organized and start thinking of ways to make it faster. He noticed which routes the forklifts took and started mentally mapping how to reduce traffic. It didn't matter that no one was asking. He couldn't help it. His brain had been trained to build systems, to optimize, improve, connect dots. Just because the world had no use for it didn't mean it had disappeared. At night, he stayed up researching automation tools. He didn't have the money for expensive courses, but YouTube and online forums became his classrooms. He watched videos at 1.5x speed, took notes in the margins of old envelopes, and used borrowed Wi-Fi from a coffee shop 2 blocks away. He wasn't sure what he was learning toward. There was no clear goal, no job application at the end, no promise of validation. But something about learning again, on his own terms, felt like air in his lungs after months underwater. One night, he stayed behind at the warehouse after his shift. The manager had gone home early. The place was quiet. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Marcus looked at the inventory software the warehouse used, outdated, clunky, inefficient. He'd been watching it glitch for weeks. He opened his old laptop and began sketching out how he'd redesign it. Not for them. Not to show anyone. Just because it was in his head and he needed to see it on paper. 3 hours passed without him noticing. When he finally looked up, the parking lot was empty and his hands were sore from typing. But on his screen was the beginning of something. A dashboard. A mock interface. A cleaner system. He saved the file with a name he hadn't used in a long time. Build 101. Not for a job, not for approval, not for anyone else. Just for the idea that if the world didn't want what he had, he'd make something that did. For weeks, Marcus worked 2 lives. By day, he lifted crates, scanned barcodes, and moved shipments. By night, he built. Not for a boss, not for a deadline, not even for money. But because every piece of code gave him something no job ever had, control. He started small. A mock-up here, a data entry automation there, an interface layout scribbled on napkins, receipts, or the back of delivery slips. He had no office, no funding, no validation, just a battered laptop, a half-broken chair, and the quiet hum of belief returning. He created his own version of an inventory system, streamlined, intuitive, built to reduce mistakes and track real-time movement. One night, curiosity got the best of him. He ran a simulation using dummy data from the warehouse, compared his system's efficiency to the one they actually used. His version was 38% faster, fewer errors, better tracking. He stared at the numbers on his screen, not smiling, not shocked, just affirmed. This wasn't a dream anymore. It wasn't a hobby. It was working, and if it could work in simulation, it could work in the world. But there was a problem. No one was asking for it, and no one wanted it from him. He thought about sending it to the warehouse supervisor, then didn't. Because he could already hear the response in his head. Nice effort. Above your pay grade. Who told you to do this? So he kept building, quietly, patiently, for himself. One night, while walking home, he passed by a local startup event in a shared co-working space. He stopped at the glass window, watching through the reflection. Inside, tech guys in t-shirts, coffee cups, laptops, presentations. He didn't go in, but he watched long enough to remember something he'd buried. He didn't need anyone's permission to be in the room. He just had to make something they couldn't ignore. And that night, when he got home, he gave his project a name. Not inventory system, not tracking tool. He called it Anchor. Because in a world trying to push him out to sea, This was what would hold him still. One of the emails he got after pitch night was from a guy named Evan. He ran a local logistics company, not huge, not flashy, but real. 3 small warehouses, 30 staff, real inventory, real problems. Evan wrote, "Your tool looks lean. We're bleeding time during intake. Want to try a test run?" Marcus stared at the screen for 10 minutes before responding. Not because he didn't know what to say, but because someone was finally asking him to build without apology. They met in person 2 days later. Marcus wore his best shirt. Evan showed up in jeans and a hoodie. They shook hands in a parking lot behind a beige warehouse that smelled like dust and diesel. Inside, Evan walked him through their setup. Old software, endless double-entry forms, confused employees who used sticky notes to track shortfalls. It was chaos wearing a high-vis vest. Marcus kept nodding, not because it was shocking, but because it looked exactly like where he came from. Over the next 3 weekends, he customized Anchor for Evan's team, simplified the input screens, added real-time stock visuals, streamlined restock alerts. No one paid him. He didn't ask. He needed something even more valuable than a check. He needed to see if his code could live. After 2 weeks, Evan emailed again. "Dude, we're moving faster. The team's not lost in paperwork anymore. This is clean. What do you charge?" Marcus didn't know what to say. He still didn't believe in charging. He barely believed this was happening. But he typed, "Let's talk. First, I'd like to shadow your ops for a day. I need to understand more." Evan replied, "Respect. Come through." That night, Marcus sat on his bed with the lights off, laptop humming on his knees. He looked at the Anchor dashboard, now glowing with real warehouse data. He watched rows populate, items move, alerts trigger. He wasn't building hope anymore. He was managing proof. There was no audience, no applause, no algorithms boosting his name, just quiet functionality. And for a kid once told, "We don't hire people like you," this was louder than any headline. His work wasn't just being tolerated, it was being trusted. 3 months after his first warehouse test, Marcus was waking up to emails he used to only imagine, startups asking for demos, founders requesting code breakdowns, even a recruiter who just happened to stumble across his project on a local business newsletter. He wasn't famous, he wasn't viral, but inside a tight circle of logistics nerds and indie operators, Anchor was quietly building a name, not his name, just the tools. At first, Marcus didn't mind. The product was working. People were using it. The system that once told him he didn't belong was now unknowingly circulating his ideas. He thought, maybe this is what winning feels like. Invisible, but irreversible. Until the email came in. Subject: Supply Core Panel, Emerging Innovators Invitation, from a generic contact and email. At first, he assumed it was spam, but the body of the email was formal, warm, and unmistakably real. You've been nominated to join a panel of emerging supply chain innovators. The event will be held at the Nexus Tower, hosted by Blackridge Ventures. We're thrilled to include the creator of Anchor, Blackridge. His throat tightened when he read the name. It was the firm that once told him, through one of its partners, "We don't hire people like you." Different floor, different division, same roof. They didn't know it was him. That was clear. He had applied under his full name back then, Marcus A. Brantley. But now, Anchor was known online simply as Built by M. Brantley. They had forgotten the face, but remembered the product. He sat with the email for 2 days, didn't reply. He thought about declining, quietly, proudly, make his own lane, avoid theirs forever. But something tugged at him. Not bitterness, not revenge, alignment. This wasn't just a chance to be seen. It was a chance to stand in the exact room that once locked itself from the inside and walk in without knocking. He RSVP'd. 2 weeks later, he was inside the same building he once walked out of, feeling invisible. The lobby was sleeker now. New marble floors. The front desk woman offered bottled water with a script-perfect smile. He nodded politely. No one remembered him. He didn't expect them to. But when they said, "We're excited to meet the mind behind Anchor," he felt something strange settle in his chest. They finally knew his value, but not his story. The panel began. 5 speakers. He was 4th. As each founder presented, Marcus watched the crowd. Venture associates, investors, middle-aged men with ironic glasses and checked blazers, young techies with MacBooks open like shields. When it was his turn, he walked up calmly, clicked his USB in. No nerves this time. His voice didn't shake. He didn't smile for them. He just explained what Anchor did, how it solved real-world logistics problems, and why it succeeded without venture capital. Someone asked where he was based. He told them the name of the shipping yard where Anchor was born. That got silence. Another asked why he hadn't scaled yet. He said, "I've been bootstrapping, literally." That got chuckles, respectful ones. But the moment that cut deepest came near the end, when a man in a Navy suit raised his hand and said, "Have you ever considered working with a larger firm, maybe someone like Blackridge?" Marcus paused. He looked at the room, then said, measured, "I did, once, a long time ago. I was told I didn't belong, so I built something that did." No one spoke for a beat. Then came a slow nod from the back row. A woman scribbled something on her tablet, and Marcus just stood there, not to prove anything, just to be undeniable. After the panel, they didn't let him leave quietly. A dozen hands shook his business cards, found their way into his coat pocket. Someone said, "We'd love to grab coffee sometime," which Marcus knew usually meant, "We'd love to download your ideas, then pretend we thought of them first." Still, he stayed composed, polite, grateful even, because not long ago, none of these people would have looked twice. But there was one card he didn't expect. Daniel C. Abrams, partner, Blackridge Ventures. The man was tall, polished, and effortlessly confident. The type who used words like synergy and exponential with a straight face. He leaned in during their handshake and said, "Let's talk. I think Anchor could be the backbone of something big. Ever thought about bringing on real support?" Marcus nodded slowly. He thought, real support, like the kind I begged for 3 years ago. The kind that came with the condition of not being me. But he said, "I'm listening." The meeting happened 3 days later. Sleek office, downtown. Framed logos of startups Blackridge had helped scale lined the hallway. Marcus sat across from Daniel and 2 associates, one young, one old, both smiling too easily. The pitch was flattering, a generous offer, equity, capital, office space, PR rollout, founding visionary status. But the contract said something different. It called for restructuring, adding a new leadership tier, shifting brand positioning, toning down some of the personal narrative around Anchor's origin. "We just want the story to be clean," Daniel said casually. "Less gritty, more tech-forward." Marcus blinked. "You mean less black?" Daniel didn't flinch. "We mean scalable." The air in the room dropped 5 degrees. Marcus didn't argue. He didn't storm out. He just asked for a moment. Stepped into the hallway. Looked out the window at a city that had once ignored him entirely. He remembered taping together his charger cord with black electrical tape, coding through hunger pangs, building something out of disbelief. Now they were offering him a golden cage, a place at the table, so long as he didn't speak too loudly. He walked back in, sat down, slid the contract across the table, untouched. Anchor was built in a warehouse by a guy who was told he'd never belong. If you want the software, you get the story. If the story's too much, then maybe the software isn't for you either. Daniel sighed. "Don't let pride ruin opportunity." Marcus stood up. "Don't let opportunity ruin integrity." He walked out. The deal stayed on the table. But he didn't look back, because in that moment, he realized something. Being invited in only matters if they don't ask you to leave yourself at the door. After walking out of that glass-wrapped office, Marcus didn't feel heroic. He felt tired. The kind of tired that settles not in your body, but behind your eyes, where thoughts go quiet for a while. He didn't call anyone, didn't post about it, didn't screenshot the contract and dunk on them online. He just went home, sat at his desk, opened Anchor. It was still there, simple, efficient, lines of code that never asked him to apologize for who wrote them. But for the first time, he didn't just see software. He saw space, a space that could be used for something more. The next morning, he added a new tab to the Anchor homepage, Origins. It wasn't sleek or fancy. It was a plain text story, his story, not dramatized, not sensational, just honest. How it started in a warehouse, how rejection shaped its design, how the product wasn't built in spite of his identity, but because of it. Within 48 hours, dozens of emails arrived. Some were from founders who had never seen someone talk about the why behind their tool. Others were from warehouse workers, from single moms running Etsy shops out of storage units, from bilingual teens translating inventory labels for their parents' restaurants. They didn't want VC pipelines. They wanted systems that didn't assume they were a problem. And Anchor, through its humility, its honesty, had started to become exactly that. Marcus hired 2 developers, not from Stanford. One was a high school dropout who taught himself Python off Reddit. The other was a Ghanaian immigrant who'd been turned down from 10 junior dev roles because of his accent. He didn't hire them for optics. He hired them because they were brilliant and overlooked. And because he knew, if he built a tool to help people be efficient, he had to build a company that helped them be seen. 6 months in, Anchor wasn't just a product anymore. It was a platform, used by community food banks, by underfunded public schools trying to track donations, by indie logistics companies with no budget for bloated software. He never used words like disrupt or unicorn. He talked about trust, precision, access. And one day, during a Zoom onboarding call with a black woman running a regional warehouse in Georgia, she looked at him and said, "I didn't know someone like us could build something like this." Marcus smiled, not with pride, but with recognition. Because the truth was, he hadn't built Anchor just to organize inventory. He'd built it to organize something the world kept trying to scatter: dignity. By the end of the year, Anchor was operating in over 120 locations. Not one had a press release, no slick ad campaigns, no endorsements from guys with podcasts and ring lights. It spread the old way, person to person, story to story, problem to solution. Each time it was installed, Marcus made sure the same onboarding principle was followed. We're not just changing software, we're changing how people feel about the systems that use them. He didn't care if the client was a 10-person fulfillment center or a county-run emergency supply unit. Each deserved stability. Each deserved tools that didn't punish them for being behind. Each deserved to not feel stupid for needing help. And somehow that mindset, quiet, focused, deeply human, started rippling outward. One Tuesday morning, while reviewing customer tickets, Marcus received a handwritten envelope, no return address. Inside was a note written in slightly slanted cursive. It read, "My son Malik is 12. He used to watch me come home from the warehouse every day, shoulders slumped. Since you installed Anchor at our site, I come home less angry, less ashamed. Last week he told me, 'You look like the boss now, Mama. I just wanted you to know.' T." Marcus held the note in both hands, didn't speak, didn't move for a while. Because somewhere along the way, Anchor had stopped being about code, logistics, or optimization, and started becoming language for something people didn't know how to ask for. A way of saying, "We matter too." In a follow-up call later that week, his developer Kojo said, "You know they're going to come knocking again, right? The same firms, the same names. This time with bigger checks." Marcus nodded. "Then let them knock. And if they offer to buy it outright?" Marcus didn't hesitate. "Then they better know, this isn't just mine to sell. This belongs to every hand that built it with me. And every person who didn't know software could feel like safety." Kojo smiled quietly. "Yeah, that's what I thought." Anchor wasn't flashy. It didn't trend. It wasn't on a billboard, but in break rooms, in cramped offices, in late-shift conversations and union meetings. It kept showing up. Simple, reliable, respectful. Marcus never said he was changing the world. He just made something that made people feel less erased inside it. The email came late at night, like most unexpected things. Subject: Keynote Invitation, National Supply Innovation Forum. At first, Marcus assumed it was another panel, another polite nod from the industry. But as he scrolled, he saw the details: a headline slot, a live audience of over 3,000, broadcasted across 5 major business networks, and the closing line read, "We believe Anchor is not just a product story, it's a leadership story." He stared at that sentence for a long time. Not because he was nervous to speak, but because this time they weren't just interested in the code. They were interested in the man who wrote it. The day arrived. Backstage, he reviewed his notes. Not bullet points, not talking prompts, just handwritten phrases: dignity, access, community, patience. He wasn't there to impress. He was there to remind. When his name was called, he stepped into the light. The stage was wide, the audience silent, and for the first time in his life, Marcus wasn't asking to be heard. He was expected. He didn't open with a pitch, he opened with a memory. Years ago, I sat in an office not far from here. I was told I didn't belong, without those exact words, and I believed it, for a while. He paused, looked out at the crowd. But then I built something that never asked anyone to fit in. It just made room. A few heads nodded. Anchor wasn't created to disrupt the world. It was created to stop the world from disrupting people who were already doing their best. He glanced at the second row. Investors, HR directors, policymakers, then added, "Let me ask you this. If the people who power your systems don't feel seen inside them, is your company really running efficiently? Or is it just running away from responsibility?" The room didn't clap. Not yet. But something cracked. Not glass, not decorum. Complacency. After the keynote, people approached, not just to compliment, but to confess. A recruiter from a major firm said, "We've overlooked so many." A director whispered, "I wish someone like you had been around when my brother tried to apply." Marcus didn't absorb it as validation. He absorbed it as proof. That truth, told plainly, could still land like thunder. And this time, they didn't call him angry. They called him necessary. The speech made headlines, not because it was loud, not because it was radical, but because it didn't try to sell hope. It simply told the truth, and in a world built on polished lies, that was enough. Anchor saw a wave of new signups. Yes, there was growth. Yes, there were metrics. But more than that, there were letters. Letters from teachers managing school supply closets with his software, from disabled veterans tracking rehab equipment in rural clinics, from teenagers who started their own inventory systems in barbershops and sneaker resellers and back-alley pop-ups. Each letter said the same thing in different ways. This made me feel like I wasn't invisible. Marcus didn't hire a PR team, didn't cash out, didn't pivot. He just kept building, more tools, more jobs, more stories. He started mentoring quietly, young black coders, first-gen college students, women returning to tech after years of being told they were too late. He set up scholarships, anonymous ones, with no application essays, just a simple form. What do you want to build, and why? There were no gatekeepers, because Marcus remembered how many gates had been slammed shut in his own face, and he didn't want to be another one. Years later, a younger employee asked him, "How did you stay so calm when they told you didn't belong?" Marcus looked at her, bright-eyed, hungry, just starting her journey, and said, "I didn't stay calm, I just didn't stop." That's the real story, not the app, not the keynote, not the offer he turned down, but the kid who heard, "We don't hire people like you," and decided, "Fine, then I'll make something you can't ignore." If this story made you feel something real, something buried, then don't just scroll away. Subscribe, like, and stay with us. Because we'll keep telling the stories they once tried to silence.